Hi, welcome to Numbers Never Lie. It's the best 60 minutes of your day. I'm Michael Smith and she's Jemele Hill. People also know us as his and hers. And today our topics include the Jets jetting, the Cowboys running, and of course we'll offer thoughts on Adrian Peterson's method of disciplining his son. Moments ago, the Vikings announced that he's returning to practice and will play this weekend, and whether further punishment is warranted for Adrian Peterson. But yesterday's action warrants us beginning on the field.
That's right. We start today with RGIII, who was forced to leave the game yesterday with a dislocated ankle. Now, Kirk Cousins came in and he threw a 20-yard touchdown on his first attempt. Take a listen to how both Kirk Cousins and RGIII felt about yesterday's game.
I believe, and I know a lot of people believe, that Kirk is going to go out there and play extremely well, and this team is going to win games because we have a very good team that's on that field. So one guy doesn't define this team. That includes me.
This is Robert's team. You know, my job is to be the backup quarterback, and if called upon to come in and play, and I better play well and help this team win. So that job doesn't change. You know, this is Robert's team, and it's now my job, if called upon as a backup quarterback, to come in and help this team win. So I'm going to do that. You know, every chance I get, or at least work very, very hard to make sure I'm doing all I can to get that done.
Now the Redskins won in a blowout over the Jags. Cousins, his QBR was 93.7, obviously a career best. So, Mike, is it a given that RG3, that he'll get his job back from Kirk Cousins?
Nope. It's not. As much as the Washington football franchise has invested in RG3, if Kirk Cousins continues to play like that, it's going to be awfully hard for Jay Gruden to go back to RG3, at least in the short term, and maybe for good. And it really comes down to the fact that everybody's in the preservation mode. In the NFL and outside the NFL, for that matter, everybody's in preservation mode. And while Dan Snyder may love RG3, while the fan base may love RG3 for a lot of different reasons, if Kirk Cousins comes in and they start winning football games and moving the football the way they did yesterday, I mean, so far in this young season, small sample size, but his average throw distance is 3 yards longer than RG3's, and they're scoring 3 points more per drive in possessions led by Kirk Cousins and RG3. It's a performance business, and it's not a popularity contest. So if Kirk Cousins leads them to wins, then RG3 is not entitled to get his job back, because just like as the franchise quarterback, he's owed the opportunity to develop and make mistakes and learn this new system. The rest of that team is owed the opportunity to win games.
I don't know how we got here so quickly, because I feel like you, me, and Tim Hasselbeck, for that matter, jinxed this situation. Just on Friday, we all said there is no way, no matter how he performs, that RG3 is going to be unseated. Now,
we didn't account for injury.
Exactly. Granted, none of us accounted for injury, but the fact that just seeing how they performed, and even though you're not, quote unquote, in some respects supposed to lose your job to injury, the fact that we can see that being a viable option, that kind of is an indication to how precarious this situation was from the beginning. A lot of us just didn't want to acknowledge it because we knew the optics said, hey, they drafted this guy expecting him to be their quarterback, RG3, for 10 years.
Oh, we all saw Kirk Cousins last year. Speaking of optics, we saw him play.
Yes, we saw him play, and he didn't look that good, and which one of many reasons that prompted me to say that RG3 was going to be the comeback player of the year. Wish I could have a mulligan on that now, since he's going to miss a significant chunk of the season. But if they go on and perform well, and for that matter, if they're in the position to make to make a push for the playoffs, Jay Gruden is caught. Like, you have to keep dealing with or dancing with the girl that brung you. Otherwise, he's doing everybody a disservice. Now, what gets really interesting is now what are those off-season conversations are like. Let's say Kirk Cousins does perform well, and regardless of record, it's very clear that he looks a little further along than RG3. Well, then what? Hence why, going all the way back, I didn't want them to draft Kirk Cousins. And this
I wanted them to trade him.
And I was with you on that. Like, they need to get him out of there before this conversation really picks up steam. But however, if it turns out that Kirk Cousins has made significant improvement from last season till now, what can they do?
Well, there you go. We were so quick to want to dismiss last year as, that's not who RG3 really is. He just had a bad season. The entire operation fell apart, and not give that same pass, if you will, to Kirk Cousins. Maybe he got better this offseason. And if they're trying to make RG3 a pocket progression passer, well, that's already what Kirk Cousins is. Maybe Jay Gruden's offense is just that much better suited for what Kirk Cousins does well than what RG3 does well. And if Cousins is leading them to victories, and he did it yesterday without Deshaun Jackson, without Jordan Reed.
And granted, it was the Jags.
It was Jags, and it was one game. He may go back to being the Kirk Cousins from last year. But if they're successful, I do believe you can lose your job for injury. Things change. And depending on how long RG3 is out, again, if Kirk Cousins is balling, sorry, watch and learn. Watch and learn how it's done from the pocket. Meanwhile, in San Diego, the Chargers handed the Seahawks their worst loss since 2011 and Seattle's first loss by more than 7 since Russell Wilson became the starter in 2012. Phillip Rivers became the first to throw for over 250 yards and 3 TDs and no picks against Seattle since 2010. And he didn't shy away from Richard Sherman, going 5 for 5 for 60 yards and throwing to Sherman's man. Wideout Keenan Allen said Sherman isn't really a shutdown corner. And while Sherman didn't speak to the media after the game, he tweeted this to his million Twitter followers, LMAO, know what that means, exposed, complete 3 passes, no touchdowns, no explosive passes. These guys make me laugh. Generally, did the Chargers bring the world champion Seahawks, including Richard Sherman, back down to earth?
You know what makes me laugh is that the same guy who usually can't wait to find a microphone, all of a sudden,
how convenient,
decides to not speak with the media and instead, I guess, tweet his response. I was among those people who, after week 1, I still don't think it's an overreaction because this just ends. Seattle has trouble on the road sometimes.
9-8 under Russell Wilson.
Exactly. Like, this is not a new story. And for whatever matter, Phillip Rivers, it seems like that San Diego seems to rise to the occasion against a certain caliber of competition.
Or play down to it.
This has been their story as well. So you have 2 colliding stories. And so in that respect, this result isn't all that surprising. But yeah, for them, I think it was a way for them to get, it was necessary in some ways for them to get humbled, maybe specifically for him to get humbled. And to also show other quarterbacks that, look, I think you have to proceed with caution with Richard Sherman in terms of going at him. He's earned that respect. All I kept telling you is, if I am a quarterback who feels like I'm pretty good at my job, then Richard Sherman, you're going to get tried. Because that is what is in the best interest of my football team, is that I do try to see what you're made of. Not to the detriment of the team, but just in a way that makes sense. But the way you made it sound was he shouldn't even look in that direction.
I never said that.
You sort of kind of made it sound that way. He should be scared. I mean, you basically were saying that.
I think there's a middleman that people conveniently forget, and that's the wide receiver. Keenan Allen got open. It was a good matchup because of Keenan Allen and how well he runs routes. If Jared Boykin didn't do that, Aaron Rodgers shouldn't have tested him. So let's stop with this scared thing, okay? It was the read. And so, but props to Phillip Rivers for going through his progressions, making throws, being confident in his playmakers to make plays. Shout out to Antonio Gates, looking like it was 2004 instead of 2014. This, to me, though, was more of a statement about San Diego than it was about Seattle. Seattle didn't do a lot of things well. But this was more San Diego imposing its will, especially offensively. They were the best ball control offense in the league last year. They did it again yesterday with their running game. The third down conversions, I think they were like 10 or 15 for the game or something like that. Their defense flies around. They should have beaten Arizona in the opener. If for them to bounce back and get this win, this is a team that I was tempted. I mean, not to pat myself on the back, and it's a little too late.
I can vouch because I heard you say it.
You heard me say it off camera. Okay, it's not on public record, but you heard me say it off camera. I was tempted to pick them to go to the Super Bowl. They were my dark horse team because of what Mike McCoy and Phillip Rivers have done together, especially on offense. And I thought that was their coming out party saying, hey, not only is this other team in Seattle not indestructible and unbeatable, but we're going to be a problem going forward in the AFC.
Well, we know where they are indestructible, and that's at home. And if assuming that they win all their home games, which I can't think of a good reason why they wouldn't, then on the road they basically have to go 500, and they're good.
Maybe there was a little bit of exposure somewhere that somebody might be able to beat them at home. Who knows? Not at night in prime time, though.
No.
All right, next up, the Niners. They jumped out to a 17-0 lead last night in San Francisco, but Chicago reeled off 21 unanswered in the fourth to pull out a 28-20 win. Now, the Bears were forced to punt on their first 6 drives, but bounced back to reach the end zone on each of their next 4. The Niners, meanwhile, finished out the game with 2 Colin Kaepernick picks and a turnover on downs in their final 3 drives. Age-old question Was this more of a Bears comeback or a 49ers collapse?
I think you know me well enough to know which one of these I'm going to pick. Of course, I'm going to put this on the 49ers. And, yes, I'm going to put a lot of it on Colin Kaepernick. Look, here was the difference in the game. Jay Cutler had Brandon Marshall, and it seemed like Colin Kaepernick thought he had Brandon Marshall. Okay, look, when you put a one-on-one ball with Brandon Marshall, he's so physical, so proven in that aspect. He's 90% of the time he's winning that ball. There were a couple situations where he tried to put Michael Crabtree in the same position. We see what happened as a result. And I also thought that in terms of decision-making, Colin Kaepernick, this certainly was not his sharpest game. He was trying to, let me go ahead and say it, do a little bit too much.
What you think about him getting a personal conduct foul? Not personal conduct.
He got
the personal foul, sportsmanlike conduct for inappropriate language.
For inappropriate language. Look, he says he didn't say anything. We know that's often what players say when...
Everybody thought it was a slur. Everybody thought it was
whatever it was something he shouldn't have been saying, because that's why he was flagged. So it was him. Maybe that's just the element of him losing his composure overall, and they just weren't that good last night. There's no excuse for why they should not have closed that game. Well, there is a reason. It's not an excuse. The reason was quarterback being willy-nilly with the football.
I'm in a glass or mug, in this case, half full kind of mood today. This is more about the Bears for me, because a lot of those picks by Kaepernick were really, really good defensive plays by the Chicago Bears secondary. Secondary, mind you, that at one point was without Peanut Tillman, without his best player. This was about a Bears team that got pushed around against Buffalo the week before, and now you bounce back, you go into San Francisco, they're opening up their home ballpark, and for them to be that resilient, what was the conversation that everybody wanted to have after that Bills loss, especially you in Chicago? Same old Jay Cutler.
Right.
He ain't that guy. Right. He doesn't have it. That was leadership. He might not have been smiling when he was doing it last night, but that was leadership. For him to take that shot that he took and to come back and keep firing and to beat the 49ers.
Play exceptionally well after taking that.
And very efficient.
Yeah.
And very efficient. I think he was 16 and 19 on short throws or something like that. But to keep trusting his players, and for Brandon Marshall and for that matter Alshon Jeffrey to play through injury and play the way that they did, the Bears showed a lot of character for me. The 49ers, I think this shows that the week before was more of an extension of the preseason, given how poorly Dallas played, and the Niners still have some issues they got to work out.
But they were dominating this game. I mean, it wasn't like that.
Yeah, they were.
They were dominating the game.
And they didn't finish it.
They should have finished it.
The Bears took it from them. You think they gave it away? I think the Bears took it from them. That's just how I choose to look at this.
It's easier to do when your quarterback throws 3 interceptions.
Or they caught 3 interceptions.
And I understand.
Or they caught them.
I understand that at least the sort of flying leap to get that interception was a dynamic defensive play, but still, decision-making is key. So, Mike, check this out.
Speaking of
decision-making, the Jets, they were down 7, driving to tie up a game they once led 21-3. And Geno Smith, he throws a beautiful game-tying touchdown to Jeremy Curley, except, somebody called a timeout. Here's Rex explaining what happened.
I don't know. I mean, I'm just telling you, I didn't call it, but clearly somebody called it. I mean, that was what they had said. So I don't know if Marty called it, Geno called it. I just know that they had blown it dead as a timeout. Obviously, if Marty sees something and in the thing, that's an important call that we want to make sure we're in the right call at that situation. But obviously, that would be reason to call it.
I wish we could cue the Law and Order sound right now. And to answer your question, Rex, it was Sheldon Richardson / Marty Mornhinweg. Marty Mornhinweg supposedly backed off from calling the timeout, but Sheldon Richardson...
You can't, right? It's got to be Rex.
Supposedly, it does have to be Rex, but he wanted a timeout, right, and Sheldon Richardson made sure that timeout was granted. Mm-hmm. Was this timeout gaff, though? Big picture? Come on, Mike. Wasn't this the most Jets thing ever to do? The most Jetsiest way to lose a game?
That's not fair.
It is totally
That's not fair. You acting like it's the butt fumble. That's not fair.
Well, now we got the timeout to go right along with the butt fumble.
You saw all the confusion going on in the backfield. All right, there was a whole lot of confusion in the backfield.
Also not good.
Okay, which was the reason why Marty Mornhinweg wanted the timeout. He recognized this play could be disastrous. Now, the whistle blew. A lot of the Packers were saying they heard the whistle blow. You scored a touchdown. Yeah, okay, hindsight's 20/20. But this wasn't like icing your own kicker either. if it were pick or a turnover, you'd be like, man, good thing Marty recognized that. Y'all acting like this man took the win in overtime. he recognized that his offense was about to self-destruct. No, the most Jetsiest thing ever, or as you put it, is turning it over before halftime. But you got to get practically a chance to put the game away and then letting Rodgers go 97 yards the other way.
You got one job.
Okay.
Don't turn it over before the end of the half.
Wilkinson getting ejected again and forcing the Jets to play the last 20 minutes without their best defensive player.
And
when their secondary
turnover.
Yeah, when their secondary is already in shambles, your best defensive lineman, with all due respect to Sheldon Richardson, he gets thrown out. And now you got to play the last 20 minutes with him. Those were the self-inflicted wounds that I'll say, okay, that's real Jets-like. But the idea that timeout or that typical Jets, no. Marty actually saw that this was not going to go well. It did, but it could have gone worse and you'd have been applauding him for it.
Well,
so let's not be unfair with that play.
Well, it isn't, you're right, it isn't just about the one play, it's about the comedy of errors, which unfortunately have come to sort of depict who the Jets are. Same old Jets. We've heard that mantra before. But Marty Mornhinweg, even before the timeout issue, look, that dude, if somebody could have been stripped of their play calling duties right there in the game, it should have been him.
It's because it's Marty.
But Marty gave us the evidence to do it.
It's the characters involved. It's Rex who, by the way, once called a timeout when he had no business. I think it was 2007, and then the closing moments of the loss of the Patriots when he was in Baltimore. He did that. But it's Rex, it's the Jets, it's Marty. You got visions of, kicking off in overtime.
That's the perfect hat trick for some foolishness, is what that is.
I got it.
All right? And Marty,
if you look at it objectively, look at it objectively. Objectively, look, they couldn't even line up right in the backfield.
I understand. But what was up with still throwing when the one thing you couldn't do before the end of the first half was a turnover? Okay, we got some breaking news here. The Vikings have reinstated Adrian Peterson after deactivating him for yesterday's game. He'll be able to fully participate in practices and is expected to play Sunday in New Orleans. Now, Peterson, he had been indicted on charges of reckless or negligent injury to a child. He turned himself in to authorities early Saturday and was released after posting the $15,000 bond. Now, this is part of a statement from Vikings owners. To be clear, we take very seriously any matter that involves the welfare of a child. At this time, however, we believe that this is a matter of due process and we should allow the legal system to proceed so we can come to the most effective conclusions and then determine the appropriate course of action. Mike, are the Vikings, are they making a mistake by bringing Adrian Peterson back?
I wonder how much of this decision had to do with their performance against the Patriots yesterday. When
you
they
wonder.
Clearly missed them. Because there's that phrase, due process, which I respect. Although it feels too soon for me. I would have liked to have seen him maybe sit for a few games. But I hesitate to say that in all transparency because I feel like the number of games that he were to sit, if any, are trivial by comparison to what's best for his son. And this story it's bothered me ever since it broke on Friday afternoon because it's very personal, and I'll get into that in just a second. But I just want to focus on the needs of his son, who, by all accounts, Adrian Peterson loves and felt like he was doing what was best for him. But for me, as a parent of 3 small children, and again, I will share my experiences with my children in this area in just a moment. But just talking about Peterson for a second, I have an 8-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 2-year-old. A 4-year-old is too young for that. That was what he did to me was over the line, was excessive. And I can't imagine what he could have done. I mean, the report is that he pushed another one of the children off of a motorcycle video game to deserve that level of extensive corporal punishment. Our job as parents is to get our children to adulthood with as few scars as possible, both physical scars and, most important, emotional scars. The most horrific things the most horrific details in this story for me weren't as much the whipping room or the use of the switch. I mean, Jemele, look, we old school. We both were raised the same way. I mean, I got whipped with whatever was closest, whatever was handy, all right, or even the leaves in the baby's mouth. The part that really bothered me was that the child was afraid that Peterson would punch him in the face if he reported it to the authorities, according to the report. That, you know, Daddy Peterson hit me on my face. I just hope that this isn't something that will come back and affect that child down the road. And there are studies, and I'll stop in a second, but I was reading portions of a book called The Primordial Violence by Murray Strauss. And he talked about the fact that it can weaken the tie between children and parents and increase the probability that the child will hit other children and their parents, and as adults hit a dating or marital partner. Spanking also, based on research, is shown to slow down mental development and lowers the possibility of a child doing well in school. But ultimately, just emotionally, I just hope that this child, those physical scars will heal eventually. I just hope emotionally that this child isn't scarred. And that's just me from the outside looking in. And I'll pass it to you before I really get personal with it.
Your opinion is obviously more than valid, and you have 3 children, and you go through this. This is on the forefront of what you do all the time in terms of dealing with issues of discipline. I'll say this: there are a lot of people, and you've heard these arguments saying, "Oh, well, my mother did worse to me, or my father did worse to me, or did something very similar, and I survived, and I'm a good citizen for it.
I turned out great. Yeah.
I turned out great." Like you, I was also physically punished as a child. And it's interesting because many years later, my mother apologized to me, and she was like, "You didn't even deserve half of the stuff that I did to you." And by today's standards, my mother would have probably been in jail, or somebody would have reported her.
I'm about to say, if you want to keep it 100, you wouldn't have made the phone call.
No, because in fact, and people, please don't take this as me diminishing the seriousness of this, but my mother used to say all the time, "You can call Child Protective Services if you want to, but you got to make it to the phone."
Absolutely.
And that was a different generation.
Correct.
And the reason she believed that was the way to discipline is because her mother, my grandmother, did it to her. And I don't want people to think that I'm being overly sympathetic with Adrian Peterson, because the allegations and the photos are horrible, and I do not condone anything that he did. But what really stuck out to me is in the text messages he had with the mother of his child and with what he told police, it was clear that there is a crime of ignorance going on here as well. He was raised this way, and even when talking to people about this topic, how they were raised greatly influences what they think of this.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, that completely, because we heard Charles Barkley say, you know, all the black people in the South, this is what they did to their kids. It's influencing the way that they think about this issue, and I don't think they understand that. I'm not sure if they've in detail read all the allegations, number one. And number two, just because it was done, that doesn't make it right. And you survived it.
So let me bring you inside my glass house right now, okay? Take you inside the Smith household. Just for the reasons that you said, I was raised. Listen, family. I'm the grandson of a Southern Baptist preacher, okay? Back in my day, the entire church congregation had license to beat my behind if I got out of pocket. During service, if necessary, okay? You understand? You understand what I'm saying?
Right.
The neighborhood.
I totally do.
We come from a time where the neighborhood, the village raised children.
Or in my mother's time, they could do it in school.
Yes, they could do it in school. The village raised children, and it was spare the rod, spoil the child. That's how I was raised, okay? And I felt like I would not change a thing about how Lisa Jordan raised her son.
Same here.
I appreciate what my mother did for me and the man that she made me to be. I would not change a thing. But my mom never hurt me. She never hurt me to a point where I was scarred, either physically or emotionally. Now, granted, if I would have gotten way out of pocket, see, the thing about it is, I was more afraid of my mom than my dad. And my mom's a little lady, but my mom had some wrath to her. And if I disrespected her, she would not only knock my teeth out my mouth, down my throat, she'd go in my throat and retrieve them. Okay, that's how my mom did not play. And so I get what Adrian Peterson is, where he's coming from the standpoint of, well, this is what was done to me, and I want to show my children that I don't play. So fast forward to when I become a parent, and I have children, and they get out of pocket. And because I was spanked, that's what I ended up doing. Because I was whipped, that's what I did. But it didn't work for me. I couldn't make peace with it. It hurt me. And I felt like, am I doing this truly out of love, even though I'm doing what you're supposed to do, which is talk to him before and then talk to him after? Am I doing this truly out of love, or am I doing it out of anger? And I just can't find the right way of expressing my disappointment. Because the bottom line, Jemele, the thing that I came to realize is I want my children to do the right thing and do right by people, not because they're afraid that I'm going to hurt them, but they're afraid of hurting me and disappointing me. And the light came on for me way before this story. That's why this story means so much to me, because I've been here. The light came on for me a while back when I realized that my son, I saw signs of him actually being afraid of me. And I'm like, son, I don't want you to fear me. I don't want that kind of relationship with him. I don't want to be looked at as a father of judgment or wrath or punishment. I don't want to be associated with pain. That's why I was taught never hit your kids with your hands, because your hands are supposed to be associated with protection and affection. And so while whipping with a belt or a switch is bad, psychologically hitting with hands might be even worse. And so for me, this conversation, there's a silver lining to this as well, much like with the Ray Rice situation. This is a conversation that needs to take place, because just because the generation before us did it, that the previous generation did it, I've done it. Now, it doesn't work. Now, obviously, it's way in the back of the playbook now. Right. It's the Hail Mary. Right. They know not to cross certain lines as it relates to me or their mother in terms of disrespect. They know that. But even after, I long since apologized to them. And I got an 8-year-old, a 6-year-old. They rambunctious. You've been around them. They're not listening half the time. I've apologized to them because I ended up doing more crying about spanking them and whipping them than they did. Right. And I apologized and said, I won't do this to you again. I don't want to hurt you. This isn't working, but you understand there are going to be consequences for your actions nonetheless. So even when this happened on Friday, I just felt like when this news broke on Friday, I felt like I just need to go home and apologize again. And they were like, all right, can we go outside? I'm like, fine. But I wanted to, I'm sorry, and hold me accountable for this. If I ever get tempted to whip you or spank you again or whatever, remind me of this, because I just don't want them growing up with a negative image of me. I want them to do the right thing and be about the right thing, but not with a negative image. And that's my only concern. I don't doubt that Adrian Peterson loves his son and was doing what he thought was best. But maybe there's no handbook to parenting, man. I'm learning that every day. There's no handbook to marriage or parenting. Nobody can tell you how to raise your kids, because everybody's situation is different. But you can still learn from your mistakes. And ultimately, I hope that Adrian Peterson, sorry for talking so long, but this has been important to me. I hope that he just, if he does need to learn, that he does, and that he has a healthy relationship with his son moving forward. And I'm going to just leave it there. No, and I think that's important. And what I came to understand, because I know my mother watches the show, and I want her to understand, I'm not saying that I wanted you to do anything different that you did. But what I did come to learn, and this, she was a single mother raising me, is that there were stresses and pressures in her life that I had no idea she was going through. Correct. And I'm sure she did it out of love for you. She did it out of love, and part of it is that there were some things that were on her back that she didn't know how to emotionally handle. And so, unfortunately, there were times, and I think that's why she apologized to me much later, there were times where she physically harmed me when I didn't deserve it, because she didn't know how to handle what was going on in her life. And I get that, I understand that, and I don't love her any less for it. Well, and just real quick, just thought about this too, talking about the people who say, well, this is how I was raised, I turned out great. My wife was raised the exact opposite. She was never spanked, she was never whipped. So when we got married, we had to come to an agreement. And it would horrify her when I did it. And we had to have conversations about it. And it just came, I eventually had to come to just this realization that it doesn't work for me. I'm not going to sit here, like I said, I'm bringing you inside of my glass house. I'm not going to sit here and act like, Adrian Peterson's entire philosophy is foreign to me. I would never go that far, would never do that, and in no way, shape, or form condone that. But I just had to come to the realization that it doesn't work for me, because I couldn't make peace with it, and I felt like there was a better way to go about it. And if this research is right, maybe there's a better way for all of us to go about it. I hope we went about that conversation in a constructive and productive manner. All right, after widespread criticism, the Panthers deactivated Greg Hardy before yesterday's win over the Lions. Head coach Ron Rivera saying he did what he felt was in the best interest of the team. Now, in July, Hardy was found guilty by a district judge of assaulting and threatening to kill his ex-girlfriend. In May, Hardy appealed the decision and is awaiting a jury trial set for November. Meanwhile, California's Lieutenant Governor and former San Francisco Mayor Gavin Newsom called for the 49ers to bench the gentleman you just saw, Ray McDonald, saying that the team's decision to continue to play him, quote, sends a troubling message, close quote, in the wake of course, Ray Rice's disturbing video and the aforementioned decision by Carolina to sit Greg Hardy. McDonald, of course, was arrested on suspicion of felony domestic violence, but has not yet been charged, as you know, Jemele. Should the 49ers have deactivated Ray McDonald as the Panthers did with Greg Hardy?
I've been pretty consistent up to this point by saying yes. But I'm going to reverse course a little bit because there's one thing, it's been so much conversation, so much noise within this conversation of domestic violence that we have a tendency to lump all the situations in together. Mm-hmm. If you're a team and if you honestly trust a player and if they're telling you that they're not guilty of something, and we haven't even gotten to the point where there have been charges, it leaves them on a slippery slope because sometimes sitting a player down can send the message that you're already convicting them. Now, I understand if you want to sit them down because you need to gather more information. And until you do gather more information, it doesn't feel right. For me, it didn't feel right that opening game. It didn't, because I think the incident, it happened right after, a couple days after.
August 31st, I believe.
Yeah, it was very close to the first week of the season. Yeah. And it was right after Roger Goodell had announced the stiffened domestic violence penalties. At that juncture, it felt wrong and it felt too quick. It felt like, okay, don't you need to take some time out to figure out what happened here before you play this guy? Because part of the reason, among many reasons why the Ravens wound up getting into that situation with Ray Rice is that they did not do, they expected the courts and the law enforcement to do the due diligence, to do their work for them, if you will. That's why Steve Bisciotti was like, I never even talked to Ray Rice. Mm-hmm. Now, seeing how their situation unfolded, you can't afford to make that same mistake. So you need to talk to Ray McDonald, if they haven't already. I assume they have. Otherwise, why else would Jed York say he's no Ray Rice? Whatever you want to infer with that. I hope that means you've talked to him and you have every confidence and faith that he didn't do what he's accused of doing. So I think his situation is a little different because right now there are no charges. There is suspicion of. Greg Hardy, he's already been convicted.
He's been found guilty by a judge.
And I know he's going through a trial.
Process, though. So generally speaking, it's the same thing.
Not quite. This is what
still due process.
It's still due. I didn't say wait through all the due process. Okay.
Some of it.
Just some of it, because I think you do in the course of the due process, you get a sense of what the evidence is.
What gave you? I got to say, I was surprised to hear your take on this. What changed your mind? What gave you this epiphany?
Well, I think it was just looking at the fact that no charges had been filed. Also, again, if you're putting yourself in the position of being the 49ers, and I'm not saying this because I'm a fan of the team.
Well, I was going to ask you.
No, that has nothing to do with it. I don't. The integrity means more to me than winning games.
I don't mean to cut you off. Go ahead. You were saying if you're the 49ers.
Yeah, I'm saying if you're the 49ers, there is a fine line for any organization, not just them, between. Are we going to believe what this player has told us what happened? Are we going to trust them? Or are we going to convict them by not playing them? You see what I'm saying? Because I would imagine with Minnesota.
It's not convicting them. It's a lot of it is for appearance and just for what's proper, what's appropriate.
Right. And that's why I said that first week of the season, given the timetable, it did not feel good
I got one more question for you before we move on, because I want to ask. I've been wanting to ask you this for a while. As a 49er fan, everybody knows you root for the 49ers. Do you find yourself at all conflicted when it comes to rooting for that team to succeed, given Ray McDonald's presence in the starting lineup?
I felt that way the first week of the season. Mm-hmm. I did. And regardless, I don't want them to ever put winning over the integrity of the organization. I'd never want that to happen. They could lose every game, and as long as I feel good about the players they have on the field, I'm fine with that. But I guess there's a part of me that says, are they deciding to trust in him for a reason? Mm-hmm. Do they really? Because we do have to allow for the fact that everybody's not going to be guilty of this. So
what you're saying is the illustration for why enforcing a personal conduct policy vis-a-vis domestic violence is very, very difficult, very tricky, a lot of gray area. Some would say impossible to be fair across the board. It's why this whole situation is so messy, because every situation is different.
And the other thing too is, like, we don't know as many details about, right now I don't know as many details about Ray McDonald that I do about a Greg Hardy.
Absolutely. Now for more bad news.
Yeah, I imagine this will be discussed. According to Adam Schefter, Ray Rice will appeal his indefinite suspension from the NFL, which was handed down on September 8th after video was released of him punching his future wife in an Atlantic City hotel elevator. Rice has until 11:59 p.m. Tuesday to appeal. According to Schefter's sources, Rice and the union are still weighing how to go about the appeal. In general, though, Mike, do you have a problem with Ray Rice appealing his indefinite suspension?
I do, and I think that's why the union is weighing how to go about it, because they know it doesn't look good. And that's what this is all about. This is how things look, not how they read or how they sound, how they look. That's how we got here since last Monday. It's the difference between reading a police report and hearing details about what happened in the elevator and seeing the actual video. Ray Rice got off light by the prosecutor. What is it? Less than 1% of such cases get a pretrial diversion program or intervention program. He got off light from Roger Goodell. Everybody's acknowledged that. So you're fighting to get off even lighter because of this concept of, well, there was no new evidence. One thing we keep getting twisted in this whole story is that this is not a criminal investigation. Even when I was thinking about this over the weekend, Jemele. Even when you and I were talking about how unenlightened and ignorant and clueless the commissioner was when it came to talking to Janae in the presence of Ray Rice. Roger Goodell is not running a criminal investigation, or he's not a counselor. That's not what he's here for. If his whole job is to protect the shield, then even if he is lying, follow me here, even if he is lying about having seen the video or having had access to the video, once America saw that video, that's bad for business. That's bad for the brand. Why'd the Ravens cut him? Because he was bad for business, not because he's a bad football player. He was good for business until the video came out. When the video came out, he was bad. They couldn't support him. They had to let him go, whether they knew exactly what happened from him telling them or not. Once everybody saw that, he had to go. So him appealing the suspension, it just feels like I get the precedent. I get the idea of, well, you know, it's double jeopardy. This ain't a court of law. We already talked, this is always subjective. The personal conduct policy is always subjective and, frankly, always arbitrary. And it's about the fact that this was an embarrassment to the players and the game for this to take place and for it to be seen. And damn precedent at this point. I'm tired of talking about precedent. Maybe precedent is the problem. Maybe precedent is why people, as you have said so eloquently over the last week, people are hiding behind due process. Because, well, this is the way it's always been done. So I get that maybe from Ray Rice's perspective and his attorney's perspective and the Players Association perspective, nothing new transpired. Yeah, something new transpired. People saw that tape. People saw the tape.
I feel like the union is trying to make a great case out of a bad example. And what they look,
that's one of your best sayings you have.
What they are trying to do, I understand from the standpoint of their union, and it is their job, no matter how
protect their players,
to protect their players, no matter how ugly the situation might be, because the players need to know that they have a resource too. However, to what end game? Because you know what's going to happen. Let's just say, for some reason, they won this appeal, right? Mm-hmm. And the suspension, the original suspension had to stand. The Ravens have released him.
I know where you're going.
Is another team really going to sign him?
Nope. You know why?
No, they're not.
Bad for business.
It's bad for business.
He helped the team. Bad for business.
So, and in fact, the union is doing him a disservice, because the best thing for him to do is to sit and then create some distance from all of this.
Right.
And come back in 2015. Put his life in order.
Yes.
Come back in 2015, ask for reinstatement, and then take it from there.
Right. You can't put precedent over principle. And the principle of the matter is this was wrong. And double jeopardy does not apply to the court of public. Double jeopardy does not apply in the court of public opinion.
Especially since the Players Union has been very silent on this issue overall. You learn something new every day, Mike. Apparently, it's the shmoney dance, not the shmoney. It's the shmoney.
It's not new. That's the point. We've been doing that since the beginning of time. It's time for some numbers you need to know. The number you need to know for Team USA is 4, because we became the first country to win 4 straight major international tournaments. Those would be World Cups or Olympics. Yahoo's Adrian Peterson penned a column calling for the NBA to pull its stars from the national team, but it didn't just stop there. He threw what we call a Woj bomb on Twitter and said it's a showcase that only benefits Coach K. What do you think about that?
Well, I'm sure it does benefit him because he can obviously show incoming recruits or potential recruits that, hey, I've got this relationship with LeBron or other people, so if you need to use them as a resource, if you come to Duke, so be it. What's wrong with that?
Whoever coaches is going to benefit.
Exactly.
Here's some good points, as Woj often does.
Yeah, the number you need to know for Brian Hoyer is 85 because he drove the Browns 85 yards for a game-winning field goal against the Saints yesterday.
My Browns.
While your boy, the backup, took 3 snaps that generated 0 yards. I think he needs to get comfortable on that bench.
Fine. Okay, because they should have benched him to begin with and never made it a competition. Just said, you know what, he's going to sit and learn Hoyer's the guy. And he's the reason, part of the reason, not the reason. You saw the tenacity of that team. That's why I picked them for the playoffs before the season. Hoyer did that without Cameron, obviously no Gordon, without Tate, throwing to Andrew Hawkins. That team is gritty. It's a new day in Cleveland. First season opening win at home since 2004. Home opening win, excuse me. The number you need to know for the Panthers is 6 because after a lot of people picked Carolina to disappoint this year, the Panthers, don't look now, 2-0 for the first time in 6 years. Cam made his debut, balled out.
What did I tell you about those Lions? What did I tell you?
We're talking about the Panthers.
No, what did I tell you?
They were at Carolina. Carolina's defense, even with the secondary turnover, was still good.
50 years, and especially
you
the way
writing off the Lions after one loss.
I'm not writing them off. I'm just saying this is what the Lions do. They look like a A-class team.
When you gonna talk about the Panthers?
Congrats to the
Panthers. Start 2-0
Don't try to conversation
shift. Do we have to talk about this?
Yes.
I own it.
All right,
the number you need to know for the Patriots is 13. I knew this already. They've avoided an 0-2 start for the 13th straight season, second longest active streak behind the Broncos. Everybody wanted to hit me up on Twitter, like, how'd that Vikings pick out work out for you, Mike? What'd you think about those Patriots, Mike? If I'd have known Adrian Peterson wasn't going to play, I probably wouldn't have picked him. That said, I'm not taking anything away from the Patriots. They're a professional football team. They handle their business. They'll be there at the end like they always are. There, I owned it. I was wrong.
I was going to give you the Peterson pass for that. I was. The number you need to know for DeMarco Murray
I don't want it, though.
is 29. Murray had a career-high 29 carries in the Cowboys' 26-10 win over the Titans. It's also the third career game with 160 rushing yards and a touchdown. Why are we talking about this? They didn't do anything dysfunctional.
You see, that's your problem. I want to talk about this at the beginning of the show, America.
Why?
Jemele said the Cowboys aren't as fun when they're actually functional.
Am I lying?
That looks like a winning formula to me. Quiet as it's kept. That defense that was so maligned looks all right. They found out that the more you hand it off, the better.
Okay, yawn. Tony Romo threw less than 30 passes, and they won.
But you got jokes if it's any other day you come at me.
Yeah, I got one last one. That 45 and 45 still a 500 team.